story begins years before, during a chilly autumn, when I first laid eyes on Claire. I was a naive 20-year-old, ambitious and carefree, while she carried herself with the confident poise of someone accustomed to admiration. She was introduced to me at a mutual friends gathering, a spirited event filled with laughter, debates, and clinking glasses. We bonded over shared jokes and a love for classic literature. By the end of the evening, I was smitten, convinced she was unlike anyone I had ever met. Our early days were idyllic. We spent countless hours wandering the city's quieter streets, discovering hidden cafes and laughing over the smallest things. Claire had a sharp wit and a knack for storytelling, which drew me in deeper. Though I was utterly captivated, there were moments when her sharp tongue cut unexpectedly, leaving behind a sting I chose to ignore. Love has a way of dulling red flags into faint warnings. As our relationship deepened, I introduced her to my family. My sister, Sammy, took an instant liking to her, or so it seemed. Sammy was outspoken, and although she was supportive of us, I could tell she held something back whenever Claire was around. I chalked it up to sibling protectiveness, brushing aside her subtle hints that Claire might not be as sincere as I believed. A year after we married, cracks began to appear in our perfect facade. Claire's career demands increased, leaving her little time for us. I noticed she had become more distant, choosing late-night work calls and solo weekends, away under the pretext of self-care. At first, I told myself it was the natural ebb and flow of marriage, a temporary phase. I didn't want to confront the idea that something more sinister might be lurking beneath the surface. Then came the whispers, cryptic remarks from colleagues, fleeting glances exchanged between Claire and her phone during dinners. My gut told me something was wrong, but every time I broached the subject, she dismissed it with irritation or turned it around, accusing me of being overly suspicious. I started questioning myself, wondering if my insecurities were clouding my judgment. By the time I found myself at that dimly lit bar, nursing a glass of whiskey, my suspicions had evolved into an oppressive weight. Yet I had no hard evidence, only a collection of half-formed thoughts and vague patterns. Little did I know, that evening would mark the beginning of a chain of events that would unravel the truth I was too afraid to confront. I sat there, mulling over the past weeks, replaying fragments of moments that didn't add up. Despite all my pondering, I couldn't pinpoint anything concrete to confirm my gut feeling that she might be deceiving me. It wasn't one glaring incident, but rather a collection of little inconsistencies, subtle hints that refused to align. Something was off, I was certain of that. Yet I had no definitive proof. No names, no faces, no clear situations to validate my unease. At times I even began to doubt my own sense of reality. Am I overthinking everything? I wondered. Could it be that I'm just concocting these wild stories in my head, imagining betrayal where none exists? Yet the knot in my stomach tightened. It was more of a gut instinct than concrete knowledge, an intuitive sense that something wasn't as it seemed. Maybe it was the start of something new, or perhaps just a fleeting indiscretion. But the more I obsessed over these thoughts, the more convinced I became. These suspicions had been festering in my mind for what felt like weeks. But when had this actually started? How long had I ignored the signs? I took another sip of my Jack Daniels, the ice rattling in the glass as if signaling that it was time for a refill. The bartender caught my glance, nodded, and promptly replaced my drink with a fresh double on the rocks. He offered a faint, knowing smile, one that suggested he'd seen this look of mine countless times before. There was something oddly comforting in his silent understanding. I took another drink, the whiskey's sweet burn warming my throat. I need to calm down, I told myself, glancing around the bar. The atmosphere was subdued. A low hum of indistinct chatter filled the room, mingling with the gentle clinking of glasses. It was a joyless place, populated by faces devoid of distinction, a sea of ordinary people. Only one person stood out, a woman in her 40s, slightly overdressed for the setting. She sat across from an older man who wore an expression of cautious hope. The way she carried herself made it clear she knew she had the upper hand. Meanwhile, the rest of the patrons lingered, seemingly waiting for the rain outside to ease before returning to lives just as gray as the weather. I sat alone, unsure what I planned to do. A voice broke my train of thought. So, what's the story? I turned toward the source. It was her, Sammy. Her sharp eyes pierced straight through me, making my words falter. She stood under the dim barlight, her rain-soaked coat dripping as she shrugged it off. "What are you doing here, Sammy?" I asked, my voice stiff. "I was worried about you," she replied, stepping closer. "I figured this is where you'd be." Do you want to talk?" Her unexpected presence threw me off balance. I scrambled to collect myself. "Worried about me? Why? What are you talking about?" She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable, before responding. I studied her face, searching for any hidden motives, unsure if I could trust her. As I sipped my drink, I ordered her a cocktail. The bartender, ever the performer, served it with a flourish, offering her a smile that lingered a bit too long as his eyes wandered. Sammy didn't acknowledge him, waiting until he moved away before speaking. Her eyes, cautious and steady, locked on mine. "Well," she began, "it's about how you've been acting lately. You seem like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Don't you think it's time you tell me what's going on?" Her words hit me hard, and I couldn't hold her gaze. She'd always had this uncanny ability to read me. That's what I admired most about her. We understood each other in ways most people never could. Sure, we had disagreements, but we never fought for long. Honesty had always been our thing, at least to an extent. Sometimes things left unspoken carried just as much weight. "Sammy, I'm fine. We're fine. There's nothing to worry about," I said, trying to sound convincing. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. My heart sank, but I pressed on, pretending not to notice the skepticism etched across her face. Sammy, calm and deliberate, took a slow sip of her drink, her gaze fixed on me the entire time. Setting the glass down on the table, she leaned forward, clasping her hands tightly in front of her. "I know," she said, her voice low but firm. I froze, my stomach twisting. "You know what?" Her tone sharpened. "Come on, Steve, don't play dumb. I know what's going on. Let's stop pretending and just be honest." Her words carried enough weight to catch the bartender's attention. I saw him glance our way, his ears pricked like he was hoping for something scandalous. Sammy noticed too, and her expression hardened. "This isn't the place for this conversation," she said, her voice low. "Let's move to one of the booths." As we stood to relocate, I noticed the bartender's disappointed expression. We settled into a booth tucked into the corner, sitting across from each other like opponents preparing for a match. "All right, what do you think you know?" I asked, leaning back in my seat. She didn't flinch. "Steve, don't bother lying to me. You're terrible at it, and we both know it. We've been through too much together for you to try and pull that now. Just say it. Whatever it is, you need to let it out." Her words hung in the air between us, the weight of them heavy and inescapable. I knew I couldn't dodge the truth forever. I met Sammy when I was just 17. Back then, she had a small infatuation with me, though that changed when I began dating her older sister, Claire. Claire, 3 years older than me, and I became a couple at 20. Sammy and I always got along well, which often seemed to irritate Claire. The two sisters couldn't have been more different, like night and day. But their fiery arguments over the years made it clear they shared a similar stubborn streak. 2 years later, Claire and I tied the knot. At the time, I believed we had a bright future ahead. We both had decent jobs, made enough to live comfortably, and seemed to have everything going for us. Meanwhile, Sammy, who had spent her youth living boldly and without regrets, had begun to settle down. By 25, she had grown into someone thoughtful and grounded, the kind of person any man would consider himself lucky to know. Claire and I have been married nearly 5 years now. Our anniversary is coming up next month. At least, that's if we even make it that far, I thought bitterly. Sammy, vibrant and beautiful, had become more than just my sister-in-law. She was someone I trusted, someone I considered a close friend. Now, as I sat across from her, my vision blurred with unshed tears. I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her earlier statement, "I know," echoed loudly in my head, a simple phrase that carried unbearable weight. She reached across the table, her hand brushing against mine before gripping it firmly. Her touch offered comfort, but it also deepened the ache in my chest. "Steve," she began softly, her voice steady but full of emotion. "If you won't say it, I will. Claire is cheating on you. I think, deep down, you've known this all along." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Yeah," I finally whispered. "I know." "What are you going to do about it?" she asked bluntly, her gaze unwavering. I looked away, unwilling to meet her eyes. My mind scrambled for some way to deny the truth, to convince myself that everything was still fine. If I didn't fully acknowledge it, then maybe it wasn't real. And if it wasn't real, it couldn't hurt me. Sammy watched me carefully, her expression softening as she read the turmoil on my face. "Steve, I care about you, but you need to stop hiding from this." "It's probably just a misunderstanding," I muttered, trying to sound convincing. "It can't be what it seems. I was clinging to my delusions, but Sammy's patience snapped. Before I could react, she reached out and slapped me. Hard. The sharp sting lit up my cheek, and the sound of the impact drew the bartender's attention. He froze mid-motion, glass in hand, watching us warily. "Is everything all right over there?" he asked cautiously. I raised a hand without looking at him. "We're fine. No problem here." The burning sensation on my cheek lingered, her handprint still vivid against my skin. I rubbed it absent-mindedly, trying to process what had just happened. Across from me, Sammy's anger seemed to dissipate almost as quickly as it had flared. Her expression softened, and her voice dropped, carrying an almost apologetic tone. "I'm sorry, Steve," she said quietly, "but you're so infuriating sometimes. I can't stand seeing you like this, pretending nothing's wrong. You deserve better than this. We have to face it." Her words hit me like a cold splash of water, cutting through the haze I'd been clinging to. I said nothing, gripping my glass tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping me grounded. She leaned forward, her voice more measured now. "Let me explain. You've been suspecting something for a while, haven't you? Even if you didn't admit it, you felt it. Well, a few weeks ago, I noticed something strange. Claire got a call while we were hanging out, and instead of answering it in front of me, she left the room. That's not normal, is it? Not for sisters." I nodded slightly, though my throat felt tight. Sammy continued. "That's when I started paying attention. Later, I had a chance to check her phone. She doesn't even lock it. She's that careless. The call was from someone named Robert." "Robert?" I repeated, my brow furrowing. "I don't know anyone named Robert." "Neither do I," she replied. "But I kept an eye out. A week later, I figured out who he is. He's some guy she used to know before she met you. Apparently, he got back in touch through social media, and they've been talking ever since." I gripped the glass tighter. "So, they're just old friends catching up?" "That's how it started," she said, her tone heavy with frustration. "But it didn't stop there." I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. "Are you saying something happened?" "Yes," she said firmly. "That's exactly what I'm saying." I struggled to process her words. "But didn't you notice anything sooner? I mean, wouldn't it have been obvious?" "At first I wanted to believe it was harmless," Sammy admitted, "but the more I watched, the more it became clear. She's been pulling away from you, Steve. It's like she's trying to create space between you two. You've been too focused on ignoring the signs to see what's right in front of you." Her voice grew softer, but no less resolute. "Steve, you're my friend. I care about you deeply. But you can't keep living in denial. This isn't going to fix itself." The weight of her words pressed down on me like a boulder. I took another drink, letting the whiskey burn its way down as I finally mustered the courage to speak. "How far do you think it's gone? Or do you know?" Sammy hesitated, her expression a mix of sadness and frustration. "I think you already know the answer." Her words hit harder than the slap. My chest tightened, and I realized there was no escaping the truth anymore. Sammy's gaze locked on mine, her eyes glimmering with a mix of emotions she struggled to hide. For a fleeting moment, she hesitated, then broke eye contact. That slight pause told me everything I needed to know. "When? How? Where?" I demanded, my voice rising with each word. Anger churned inside me, threatening to explode. Sammy exhaled deeply. "I know she's seen him at least 3 times over the past 2 weeks. I wasn't completely sure at first, but 2 days ago I found out for certain. A friend of mine who works with Claire mentioned it, completely by accident. Apparently, Claire met him twice for lunch and once for dinner last week." I nodded grimly, piecing the clues together. "That explains it. There were a couple of times recently when I called her office to ask about lunch and she wasn't there. Then, last week, she said she had to attend some seminar. She got home after midnight, claiming it ran late and that her team went to a hotel bar to unwind afterward. She showered before bed that night and we didn't... Well, nothing happened between us." The weight of realization pressed down on me, each detail cutting deeper into my chest. It was like watching a puzzle assemble itself into a picture I didn't want to see. "Damn it all," I muttered through clenched teeth. Sammy leaned forward, worry etched across her face. "Steve, listen to me. Don't do anything reckless. Don't let her push you into doing something you'll regret." My face hardened as I absorbed her words, my emotions shifting into something dark and unrecognizable. Sammy's concern deepened as she watched my transformation. "I won't stand for this," I said coldly, my voice low but simmering with fury. "This stops now. There's no place in my life for betrayal. She'll pay for what she's done, and so will he. Sammy's voice wavered with emotion as she tried to reach me. Steve, please. Take a step back and think about what you're doing. Don't rush in without a plan or you'll make things worse. Her words broke through my anger, nudging me toward reason. Slowly, the white-hot rage began to cool, just enough for clarity to creep in. At least I wasn't imagining it, I murmured. Do you think she's with him right now? Sammy hesitated, then nodded. Tears welled in her eyes, one slipping down her cheek. Yes, she whispered. That's why I came to find you. I couldn't sit by and let you stay in the dark. My anger flared again, hotter this time. I slammed my fist on the table, the sound drawing stares from across the bar. I raised a hand toward the bartender, who returned my glance with a knowing half-smile. How the hell could he possibly understand? Do you know where they are? I asked, the question tinged with desperation. Sammy shook her head. No, not exactly. But I'll see my friend again tomorrow and try to find out more. I do know this guy is married with kids. I don't have his address yet, but I'll dig up whatever I can. I reached for her hand, holding it tightly. As I brushed away the tear on her cheek, I said, Thank you, Sammy. I know this isn't easy for you, and I appreciate it more than you know. Her voice trembled slightly. What are you going to do? I exhaled sharply, my mind racing. Not what I want to do, at least not yet, but I'll make sure this ends. When I act, it'll be final. No loose ends, no regrets. They'll both face the consequences. In the meantime, I'll protect what's mine and gather the proof I need to do this right. Sammy watched me, her concern evident as I drained the rest of my drink. I caught the bartender's eye, signaling for another round. He poured us each a fresh glass and approached with a slight nod. Before Sammy could say anything else, I raised a hand to silence her until the drinks arrived. Sliding a bill across the counter, I muttered, Keep the change. The bartender accepted the tip without a word and moved on. How long do you think you can keep this up? Sammy asked cautiously. Seeing her, being around her? I've been doing it for weeks already, I said flatly. She hasn't noticed a thing. I'll keep up appearances until I'm ready. Sammy drained her glass in one swift motion and stood, slipping on her coat. I need to go, Steve. Let's talk tomorrow. I'll see what else I can find out. As I helped her with her coat, the closeness stirred a pang of emotion. Damn it, she looked so much like Claire. Her tear-filled eyes met mine as I kissed her cheek. Go home. I'll be fine. I'll call you tomorrow, I said. She nodded, offering a faint smile before stepping into the damp night. I sat back down, staring into my glass as the reality of the situation washed over me. One thing was certain, they would both pay. And when it happened, it would be swift, calculated, and without mercy. I barely remember anything after that. Somehow, I woke up in my own bed, my mouth dry and foul as if I'd been chewing on cardboard. My head pounded as I tried to sit up, the room spinning slightly around me. Turning over, I realized the other side of the bed was empty. Claire wasn't there. As my senses slowly came back, I caught the faint sound of movement downstairs. Dragging my legs over the edge of the bed, I stood shakily, gripping the nightstand for balance. What the hell did I do to myself last night? I wondered, wincing at the memories of whiskey-fueled excess. Stumbling into the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, hoping to wash away some of the lingering fog. After forcing myself to freshen up, I headed downstairs, my body aching with every step. In the kitchen, there she was. Morning, sweetheart, Claire said casually, her tone light but with a trace of curiosity. Rough night. What did you get up to? The response that ran through my mind was sharp and venomous. Wouldn't you like to know, you liar? Instead, I forced a neutral tone. Just met up with an old friend. Got carried away, that's all. I poured myself a glass of orange juice and gulped it down, the acidity making my stomach churn, then refilled it for another round. Oh, who was it? She asked, her voice pleasant, but the question digging for something more. Bob, I said without missing a beat. An old buddy from way back. Haven't seen him in years. He's in town for a couple of days on business. Bob? She repeated, a flicker of something crossing her expression before she turned away. Yeah, you probably remember me mentioning him. College days. We played football together, tall guy, dark hair, even asked about you. Claire's brow furrowed slightly, her confusion poorly masked. Doesn't ring a bell. But hey, the important thing is that you had a good time, she said, settling into a chair across from me. I watched her carefully, the conversation with Sammy from the day before playing on a loop in my mind. Keeping my voice steady, I asked, "So, what about you? How was your night? Anything interesting? When did you get home?" Her eyes met mine, steady and composed, as she delivered the lie. "Oh, nothing exciting, just work stuff. I grabbed a bite to eat afterward and came home around 9:30. The lie hit me like a brick. I knew she hadn't been home at 9:30. I was still there at 10 before heading out to the bar. Strike two, I thought grimly. "I've got a few errands to run this morning," I said, setting my glass down deliberately. "Might be late tonight, so don't wait up. Bob and I still have some catching up to do." Her smile was faint, her tone carefully neutral. "You should invite him over if he's around for a while. It's always nice to meet your old friends." "Oh, I'm sure I will," I replied smoothly, matching her calm. "He'd probably love to see you again." "Well, maybe it'll come back to me who he is," she said lightly, tilting her head. "Now go on, you don't want to be late. Do you need me to drive? You had a bit too much last night." "I'm good," I said, brushing off the offer. "Just need to grab a cab and pick up my car from the bar." I headed upstairs to get dressed, downing more orange juice and popping a couple of painkillers before leaving the house. Claire was still getting ready as I walked out the door. My day was packed, but the truth was clear. This charade wouldn't last much longer. The image of Claire and her so-called Bob fueled my anger, my fists clenching involuntarily. One way or another, he'd pay for this. They both would. Work was a chaotic mess of calls, emails, and endless meetings. My secretary handled what she could, but by mid-morning, I finally had a moment to breathe. I shut my office door, leaned back in my chair, and started reviewing my finances. In less than 15 minutes, I had secured my accounts, moving cash where she couldn't touch it. Then I scheduled an appointment with a divorce lawyer. The meeting was set for a few days later, giving me just enough time to gather more information. Not that I needed much, just enough to give me leverage when the time came. Claire had her own bank accounts and credit cards, so I didn't need to worry about those. But the joint account? That was an easy fix. I made sure to close any loopholes, locking down what little was left. If she wanted to take anything, she'd have to fight for it. By the time I finished, my head felt clearer. I knew what I had to do. Claire might think she could play me, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without consequences. My personal account was secure, with only a modest balance left in it. The bulk of the funds had already been withdrawn and tucked away where no one could touch them. Since Claire and I didn't have kids, a potential separation would likely be a clean break. Still, I held on to the faint hope that we could salvage our relationship. If, and only if, she owned up to her betrayal and asked for forgiveness. Without that, there would be no future for us. The thought of ending things left me with a hollow ache in my chest. Sitting at my desk, I replayed everything, the steps I'd taken, the decisions I'd made. Did I need more proof of Bob's involvement, more concrete evidence? Or was what I already knew enough to bring them both down? The shrill ring of the phone snapped me out of my thoughts. "Yeah?" I answered, my tone clipped. "It's me, Sammy," she said. "How are you holding up, Steve?" "Oh, you know," I replied with a heavy sigh. "Keeping busy. A lot on my mind, plans, thoughts, trying to piece things together." "Well, I've been doing some digging," she said, her voice lowering slightly. "Turns out his name is Bob Stones. He's married, with kids. I even got his address and know where he works. My friend at Claire's office didn't suspect a thing when she shared this with me. She's seen them together more than once, and Steve, they're not exactly subtle. Apparently, they've been getting close." "Has your friend actually seen them together?" I asked, my voice tightening. "She has," Sammy confirmed. "They were at the Ramada the other night after that seminar. They stayed behind after everyone else had left. My friend said it was obvious they were way too comfortable with each other." I clenched my jaw, nodding even though she couldn't see me. "This is a start. There's probably CCTV footage from the hotel. Send me the details you have. I need to figure this out. It's eating me alive." Within minutes, Sammy texted me the information. I immediately looked up Bob's social media profile and found his photo. His face seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't quite place where I'd seen him before. Glancing at the time, I realized it was almost lunch. On impulse, I decided to call Claire, partly to test her and partly to stir things up. My stomach churned as the phone rang. When she answered, her cheerful tone felt like a slap in the face. "Hi, sweetheart," she said brightly. "Hey, babe," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. "What are you doing for lunch? Thought we could meet up if you're free." "Oh," I'd love to, but I have an appointment in about 30 minutes that'll run through the afternoon, she said smoothly. I'm just going to grab something quick from the store next door. An appointment, huh? What's it about? Anything interesting? Just routine stuff with a new client, she replied, her voice light. I think it's with someone named Mr. Stones. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She didn't even try to hide it. My grip on the phone tightened as I struggled to keep my tone steady. Are you there? She asked after a moment of silence. Yeah, I'm here, I said through gritted teeth. In my head, the rage was boiling over. That's strike 3, Claire. You and Mr. Stones are finished. No forgiveness, no mercy, total destruction. Out loud, I managed to say, sorry, got distracted for a second. Anyway, I've got to go. Good luck with your meeting, and I'll see you tonight. Love you. Love you too, she said before hanging up. I placed the phone down carefully, my knuckles white from gripping it so hard. My secretary poked her head through the door, breaking my focus. Steve, I'm heading to the grocery store. Want me to grab you anything? She asked. Yeah, give me something big, hearty, and full of red meat, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. I need to sink my teeth into something. She gave me a curious look before nodding and closing the door. I could tell she thought I was acting strange, but I didn't care. Something was brewing, and she could sense it too. Meanwhile, Sammy had her own plans. She showed up at Claire's office, walking into the lobby just in time to see her sister step off the elevator with a tall, dark-haired man in his early 30s. Sammy recognized him immediately from the photo. It was Bob Stones. Claire froze when she saw her sister. Sammy, what are you doing here? She asked, her voice tight. Sammy smiled innocently. Oh, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by to see my favorite sister. Maybe we could grab lunch? Claire's discomfort was palpable. Well, Mr. Stones and I have a business lunch, so maybe another time, she replied, clearly flustered. Bob extended a hand, his expression polite but wary. Hi, I'm Bob Stones. Nice to meet you. Sammy shook his hand, her smile razor-sharp. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Stones. How long have you known my sister? Bob hesitated, confused by the question. Before he could answer, Claire grabbed Sammy's arm. We really need to get going. See you later, okay? She said hurriedly, pulling her toward the door. Sammy watched as they stepped into a waiting taxi. Claire glanced back nervously, her face a mix of guilt and frustration. Sammy smiled to herself, already planning her next move. Back in my office, I tore into a hefty meat pie, savoring the rich flavor as I carefully mapped out my next move. Sammy had confirmed that Claire was out of the office for the entire day, so I called her secretary to double-check. It was true. Claire wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Perfect. Financially, everything was secure. My accounts were locked down, and a locksmith was ready on standby. My lawyer was prepped, waiting for the final pieces of information I promised to provide. Tonight, the wheels would start turning. I'd let Claire and Bob stew in uncertainty for a while before delivering the final blow. My father always said, be direct, don't play games, hit hard and hit once. I hadn't needed that advice in years, but now it felt like the right time to apply it. Tonight, I'd lay the groundwork for what came next. When Claire walked through the door that evening, she was as stunning as ever. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, except for the faint trace of men's cologne clinging to her. I kissed her cheek lightly, watching the slight hesitation in her expression. Where are you headed? Is everything all right? She asked, her voice casual but curious. I'm fine, I replied. Just dealing with something. Jerry invited me to a poker night with some of the guys from work. Thought it might help clear my head. I won't be out too late. Without waiting for a response, I left, heading straight to Jerry's. He was the kind of friend you wanted in your corner. Loyal, no nonsense, and always ready for action. In his garage, I changed into dark overalls and pulled a ski mask over my head. Tonight wasn't about conversation. Tonight was about action. Jerry and I exchanged a silent nod before climbing into a beat-up sedan he'd borrowed for the night. It was unremarkable in every way, blending perfectly with the suburban streets as we made our way to the address Sammy had given me. Bob Stone's house was quiet, with only one light glowing faintly from inside. We parked a short distance away and waited, tension thick in the air. Eventually, the front door opened. Bob stepped out, got into his car, and drove off. Jerry followed at a safe distance, his hands steady on the wheel. We already knew his destination, so there was no need to rush. When we arrived at the sports field, we parked discreetly and watched as Bob went through his routine, collecting a bucket of golf balls and heading to the practice area. It was also predictable, down to the exact time. The car was quiet except for the faint hum of the radio. Kenny Rogers' voice filled the air briefly before Jerry reached over and switched it off. We sat in silence, watching, waiting. My fingers twitched with the urge to act, but I forced myself to stay calm. Rushing in would only complicate things. The parking lot gradually emptied until only a few cars remained. As Bob packed up his clubs, Jerry made his move. He slipped out of the car, moving with practiced stealth. Bob didn't notice until it was too late. One swift punch to the jaw sent him sprawling. Jerry, a former cage fighter, unleashed a barrage of blows, targeting Bob's ribs and groin with calculated precision. Bob crumpled to the ground, gasping in pain, but before he could cry out, Jerry shoved him into the trunk of his car and slammed it shut. "Smooth as butter," Jerry said, peeling off his gloves as he returned to the sedan. "Thanks, Jerry," I said, genuinely grateful. "I owe you for this." "Don't sweat it. This was clean, no cameras, no witnesses, just like we planned." He smiled faintly. "Now let's head back. We've got a poker game waiting and the guys are probably wondering where we are." We drove back to Jerry's, where a few friends were already gathered around the table. The night passed in a blur of laughter and card games, the stakes kept intentionally low. These weren't the kind of friends who'd betray you for a pot of money. Their support was comforting, but I couldn't fully relax. My mind was already racing ahead to the next steps with Claire. I stumbled into the house just after 1 a.m., feigning the effects of too much booze. Jerry had sent one of the guys to drop off my car, completing the illusion. Claire was still awake, sitting stiffly in the living room. Time for an Oscar-worthy performance. "Why are you still up, love?" I asked, slurring my words slightly. "Told you I'd be late. You okay?" She eyed me suspiciously, her arms crossed over her chest. "You've been acting strange lately, Steve. What's going on? Is there someone else? Something else?" I laughed, the sound hollow to my own ears. "Nothing like that, my petal. Just work stress. It'll all be over soon." She studied me, her frustration evident as she tried to piece together my cryptic response. I threw my jacket toward the coat rack, missing completely, and collapsed onto the sofa with an exaggerated groan. "You're impossible," she snapped. Her voice carried the edge of someone who was seconds away from saying too much. "What?" I asked innocently, leaning back and closing my eyes. "You worry too much. Everything's fine." Her anger simmered beneath the surface, but she didn't press further. When we finally went to bed, I pretended to fall asleep almost instantly. I could feel her staring at me in the darkness, the tension between us thick and unresolved. She didn't know it yet, but the games were just beginning. The next morning, Claire was already downstairs making coffee by the time I stumbled into the kitchen, playing up the perfect hungover husband. "Morning, darling," I groaned theatrically, rubbing my temples. "My head feels like it's been through a blender. Got anything for this?" Without a word, she tossed a bottle of headache pills in my direction. I grabbed a mug of coffee and took a long sip, watching her carefully. She seemed composed, but her eyes gave her away, guarded, tense. Her phone sat on the table, and I wondered if she was expecting a message. She caught me glancing at it and stiffened, her fingers twitching as if resisting the urge to grab it. "Needs a charge," I said lightly, sliding the phone toward her. "Wouldn't want you missing anything important." A flicker of panic crossed her face before she quickly masked it. I took another sip of coffee and casually left the kitchen to get dressed, leaving her to stew. As I climbed the stairs, I could feel her gaze boring into my back. Alone in the kitchen, Claire's thoughts churned. Could he know? No, that's impossible. It had only been a few weeks. A handful of lunches, a couple of dinners, and a few private moments at the hotel. Nothing serious. It was just a little excitement, nothing that could ever lead to trouble. Or could it? The thought gnawed at her. When was the last time we even slept together? The realization hit her like a slap. Maybe this was the problem. Maybe she needed to fix things before it was too late. By the time I came back downstairs, Claire had made up her mind to reconnect, but I was already heading for the door. She reached out, trying to pull me into a deeper kiss than usual, but I sidestepped her with a smile. "See you later, love," I said, waving as I backed out of the driveway. In the car, I let a smirk creep onto my face. The game was just beginning. At 11 a.m., I decided to text Claire just to see how she'd react. "Sorry I've been distant, love. Lots on my mind, but it'll all be sorted soon. Love, Ox." I leaned back in my chair, waiting for the response. Just after lunch, Sammy barged into my office, her face pale and full of urgency. "Steve, what the hell is going on?" she demanded. I looked at her calmly. "What do you mean?" "Bob Stones," she said, lowering her voice. He was found knocked up and locked in the trunk of his car this morning, Claire told me. She's absolutely shaken. A slow smile crept across my face. Terrible. These things happen sometimes. It's always worse when it's someone you know, but what can you do? Sammy's eyes narrowed. You did this, didn't you? Did what? I asked, my tone nonchalant. You know what I mean? Is he badly hurt? I shrugged. I heard he's got a few bruises, nothing broken, just roughed up a little. Her voice softened. So you didn't... I cut her off. No, Sammy, I didn't lay a finger on him. She exhaled, clearly relieved. Claire said his company called to cancel their meeting because Bob's in the hospital. His wife called them. Isn't that sweet? I chuckled. Adorable. Next time, things might not be so easy for all of them. What's that supposed to mean? She asked, her eyes widening. Accidents, I said cryptically. Can happen anywhere. That evening, when I got home, Claire's car wasn't in the driveway. No note, no text. I called her. Hey, love, where are you? I asked cheerfully. I'm visiting a friend in the hospital, she replied quickly. I'll be home soon. Hope she's doing okay. See you soon, I said before hanging up, not giving her a chance to elaborate. About 30 minutes later, Claire walked in. Her face was pale, her expression uneasy. How's your friend? I asked casually. Nothing too serious, I hope? She hesitated. Oh, no, just some bruises from a fall. She'll be fine in a few days. That's good, I said, pouring her a cup of coffee. Claire sipped the coffee, her eyes darting toward me. One of my colleagues was attacked, she said abruptly, testing the waters. I feigned shock. Attacked? What happened? He was knocked up and left in his car overnight, she said, watching me closely. That's awful. Did they catch who did it? Was anything stolen? She shook her head. No, nothing was taken. It's strange, really. Fortunately, Bob wasn't seriously injured. Her mistake hung in the air. I didn't respond, letting the silence stretch until she realized what she'd said. Her face reddened, and without another word, she left the room, heading upstairs. I watched her retreat, my mind racing. She was unraveling faster than I'd anticipated. It was time to escalate. The game had just gotten interesting. As Claire headed upstairs, I called out after her. I need to step out for a bit. Won't be long, I said, already grabbing my keys. She paused mid-step but didn't reply. I drove straight to the address Sammy had given me, Bob Stone's house. When I knocked on the door, a petite woman with dark hair opened it. Her wary expression told me she wasn't expecting company. Mrs. Stones, I began, keeping my tone measured. You don't know me, but I need to speak with you about something sensitive. May I come in for a moment? She hesitated, then stepped aside, gesturing for me to follow her to the living room. Once inside, I got straight to the point. My name is Steve Ryland. I hate to say this, but my wife Claire is having an affair with your husband. Her face froze, the words hitting her like a slap. Slowly, she sank onto the sofa, her head dropping into her hands as tears began to fall. I knew it, she said bitterly after a long pause. I just knew he was back to his old ways. I'm divorcing Claire, I said, my voice steady. I've given her every chance to come clean, and she's done nothing but lie. I don't know how long this has been going on, and frankly, it doesn't matter. She betrayed me, and I'm done. Her eyes, wet with tears, sharpened as she asked, Does this have anything to do with the attack on him last night? I don't know anything about that, I replied firmly. But I'll be honest, I don't care. Whoever did it, good for them. Her mouth twisted into a bitter smile. Wouldn't surprise me if he's been sniffing around someone else's wife, too. That's why we moved back here. Because he cheated before. I handed her the contact information for my lawyer and locksmith, then left her fuming on the couch. She didn't deserve to be blindsided like this, but I had bigger problems to deal with. My next stop was the hospital, just 10 minutes away. I walked through the lobby feeling a strange mix of tension and relief. A part of me felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and located Bob's room in a quiet corner. Slipping inside, I carefully shut the door behind me. Bob was lying in the bed, his face a swollen mess. One eye was completely shut, the other bloodshot and unfocused as it tried to make sense of me. His bandaged jaw twitched, as if he wanted to speak, but no sound came. Jerry had done his work well. I pulled up a chair, sitting close enough to ensure he felt my presence. You look like you don't recognize me, Bob, I said, my voice low but steady. Think for a moment. I'll wait. He stared blankly, clearly confused. Let me help, I continued. How many married women have you messed around with, Bob? How many marriages have you destroyed? Let's start there. I watched as understanding slowly dawned on his battered face. "I'm married to a woman named Claire," I added, leaning forward. "Does that ring any bells?" He nodded weakly, the movement almost imperceptible. "Good. Now we're getting somewhere." My voice dropped further, sharp as a blade. "I came here to deliver a message from your wife." Bob's one good eye widened, his lips parting as if to speak, but nothing came out. I pressed on. "She wants you to know it's over," I said coldly. "The divorce papers are on their way, and she told me to say one more thing. Stay the hell away. She's had enough of you." A single tear escaped from his uninjured eye, trailing down his cheek. I leaned closer, my voice like ice. "You ruined my marriage, Bob. You're the reason everything I built is falling apart. And this," I gestured to his bandaged face, "this is just the beginning. We'll be seeing each other again, I promise you that. You'll pay for what you've done, again and again. Count on it." I stood, watching him tremble as he struggled to process my words. Just before leaving, I leaned in one last time. "Oh, and in case you're wondering, I didn't do this to you." I let the lie hang in the air, knowing it would gnaw at him. For good measure, I slammed my fist into his face, hearing a satisfying crunch as his nose gave way. He gasped, his cry turning into a garbled moan. I followed with a swift punch to his groin, his body convulsing before going limp. Satisfied, I turned and left the room, the sound of his ragged breathing fading behind me. No one saw me leave, but if they had, they would have seen a man walking away with a slight smile. On the drive home, I forced myself to think clearly. The anger that had consumed me earlier was now under control, replaced by cold, calculated focus. Retaliation wasn't just an act. It was a strategy, a process I intended to see through to the bitter end. Yet, despite the satisfaction of taking my first steps toward revenge, the weight of what I'd lost lingered. My marriage was over, and nothing I did could change that. Claire had shattered everything we once had, and there was no putting it back together. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was parked where she'd left it earlier. I tapped the hood absent-mindedly as I walked to the front door, the reality of the situation sinking in. Sliding my key into the lock, I paused for a moment. This might be the last time I entered this house as her husband. My chest felt heavy as I stepped inside, bracing myself for whatever came next. The weight of the last few days pressed heavily on me as I walked toward the living room. From the doorway, I could hear the faint murmur of the TV. I paused, my eyes locking on Claire. She was perched on the edge of the sofa, her body stiff with unease. Her shoulders were tense, and her trembling hands clutched the fabric of her pants as though trying to ground herself. The air in the room was thick with tension. She glanced up at me, her eyes wide and fearful. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. I said nothing, brushing past her toward the bar. Pouring a generous glass of whiskey over ice, I took my time, letting her stew in the silence. Returning to the room, I set the glass deliberately on the coffee table and sank into the chair across from her. I watched her, my expression neutral, while taking a slow sip of the whiskey. Its warmth spread through me, but it did little to dull the sting of betrayal. I let the silence stretch, savoring her visible discomfort. She shifted slightly, her fear battling with a flicker of defiance. Finally, she broke. Straightening her spine, she tried to muster some semblance of control. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice trembling despite the forced calmness. I didn't answer. Instead, I took another deliberate sip, holding her gaze. "Steve, talk to me!" she snapped, her voice rising with frustration. Setting my glass down with deliberate care, I leaned forward. "Fine," I said, my voice calm and measured. "I'll tell you where I was, if you tell me where you've been. Deal?" Her hesitation was brief but telling. We were two opponents circling each other, waiting for the first to make a misstep. When she finally answered, her voice carried a forced casualness. "I told you already. I was at the hospital visiting a friend. Why are you acting like this?" I smiled faintly, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "Of course you were. It's exactly what I expected you to say. Care to try again?" Her composure wavered, her voice tightening as panic seeped in. "I don't know what's wrong with you, but I have told you the truth." I leaned back, studying her carefully. "All right," I said evenly. "Let me tell you where I went. Maybe it'll give you some clarity about where this conversation is heading." I let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing, leaning slightly closer. "I also visited a friend, someone I didn't know very well until today, but now we're acquainted. She's a nice woman, really. Her name is Mrs. Stones. Does that ring a bell?" The blood drained from Claire's face as realization dawned. I didn't let up. Her husband, Bob, had a bit of a rough night, ended up in the hospital. Nothing life-threatening, just a few bruises here and there. He'll be fine, I said, my tone laced with mock sympathy. That's good news, right? Claire's panic was written all over her face. What were you doing talking to her? She stammered, even though she already knew the answer. Well, I said, reclining in my chair, it turns out her husband is something of a ladies' man. I thought she deserved to know the truth. Don't you think that's fair? Her hands flew to her face, her voice barely a whisper. Oh my God. I kept my tone light, almost mocking. What's the matter, sweetheart? Can I get you something? A drink, maybe? Or do you already know enough about Bob Stone's extracurricular activities? Her mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. I decided to spare her the struggle. Let me make it easy for you, I said, my voice dropping, cold and steady. I leaned in closer, staring into her eyes. I know. Her hand flew to her mouth as the words sank in. The color drained completely from her face as she processed what I'd just said. Her eyes darted to mine, searching for any sign of softness, any hint of forgiveness. She found none. I know about you and Bob, I continued, my voice low but cutting. I've known for a while, not long, but long enough. So if there's anything you'd like to say, now's your chance, before it's too late. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the TV in the corner. I waited, my gaze steady as Claire's world unraveled in front of me. I drained the last of my drink and rose to pour another, my movements deliberate, masking the storm brewing inside me. Are you sure you don't want one? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Claire shook her head, but I poured a second glass anyway, handing it to her as I sat back down across from her. She hesitated, then took a long sip, her trembling hands betraying her composure. Finally, she looked at me, her voice shaky as she spoke. It didn't mean anything, Steve. It was just... Zex, she said, barely audible. I repeated her words, the disbelief thick in my tone. Just Zex? Of course, nothing at all, right? As if the vows we made to each other didn't mean a thing. The anger I'd been holding back simmered to the surface as she tried to downplay what she'd done. It just... happened, she insisted, her voice defensive. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. Don't insult me, Claire. Nothing just happens. You made a choice. You planned it. You both agreed to betray me, to betray this marriage. You chose the time, the place. So don't sit there and treat me like I'm an idiot. She flinched at my words, her defenses crumbling. It was only twice, she blurted out, her voice rising with desperation. And honestly, it wasn't even good. It wasn't fun, Steve. I spent the whole time worrying you'd find out. Well, congratulations, I said coldly, my sarcasm slicing through the air. I finally found out. I hope it was worth destroying everything we built. Steve, please, she begged, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything. We can get through this. I'll do whatever you want. Anything to fix this. I let out a harsh laugh, the sound echoing off the walls. It wasn't amusement. It was the bitter realization of how far we'd fallen. Claire's eyes widened, her pleading expression giving way to one of raw fear as she began to grasp the severity of the situation. You're sorry? I asked, leaning back in my chair. Sure you are. But let's be honest, Claire. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. If I hadn't found out, would you have stopped? No, I don't think so. Her lip quivered, but she said nothing. All the cliches come so easily, don't they? It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. Lies, Claire. Lies you've been telling me and yourself this whole time. The truth is, you're not the woman I married. I don't even recognize you anymore. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of my words sank in. Please, Steve, she whispered, her voice breaking. What can I do? I'll do anything. It's too late, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. We're done. While I was out, I called Sammy. She knows everything now. She'll be here soon to pick you up. Her face went pale. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice trembling. Are you really kicking me out? I stood, finishing my drink and slamming the empty glass onto the table. Go wherever you want. Back to the hospital to visit your boyfriend for all I care. Just get the hell out of my house. We're done. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Sammy standing there, her expression somber. Without a word, she followed me into the living room where Claire sat sobbing uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking with every ragged breath. Get her out of here, I said quietly. I can't look at her anymore. I hate what she did, but I still care enough to know I shouldn't be around her right now. Please, Sammy, take her. Sammy nodded and went to work, moving briskly to pack Claire's things while I poured myself another drink. For the next several minutes, I sat silently, listening to the muffled sound of my wife's sobs as her sister gathered her belongings. Within 10 minutes, Claire was gone, leaving behind nothing but the wreckage of our life together. Later that night, I stood in the backyard, staring into the crackling flames of a bonfire. Everything Claire had left behind, her clothes, her photos, her letters, was reduced to ash. There was no way she would ever set foot in this house again. "Good riddance," I muttered, finishing the last of the whiskey in the bottle before hurling it into the fire. The glass shattered on impact, feeding the blaze as it consumed the remnants of a life I no longer wanted. The fire roared in front of me, but it couldn't burn away the ache inside. Retribution would come, and it would help. But the scars Claire had left, those would take far longer to heal. The flames eventually dwindled, leaving only the faint glow of embers as I stood in the cool night air. The weight of the past weeks settled on me. Not just the betrayal, but the emptiness that followed. For years, I had built a life with Claire, and though it ended in ash, there was still a strange sense of liberation in the finality of it all. As the fire died, a light drizzle began to fall, washing away the remains of the night's turmoil. I turned toward the house, its shadows now quieter, more hollow, yet oddly peaceful. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, unshackled from lies and pretense. There was no revenge left to plot, no anger left to stoke. What remained was a simple truth. Endings are rarely clean, but they are necessary. And sometimes, from the rubble of what was, we find the foundation for something stronger. With a deep breath, I walked inside, leaving the door open just enough for the rain to wash away the last traces of smoke.